In the crumbling corners of Pennsylvania, beyond the reach of highways and city lights, lie towns the world forgot, but whose stories refuse to die. These were places built by coal smoke and iron rails, where the earth was torn open for wealth, and the past was buried just as deep. Yet from those burial grounds, something strange clawed its way back to the surface. From ghost towns hidden in fog, to abandoned mining villages whispering with voices that shouldn't be, Pennsylvania is stitched together with legends that creak like old floorboards beneath your feet. Some call it superstition, others know better. Today we're resurrecting 12 eerie legends from these lost places. Stories soaked in coal dust, wrapped in mist, and tinged with fear. These are tales passed from firelight to firelight. Stories of creatures, curses, and spirits that still linger. Not all echoes come from memory. Some come from something still watching. And in the end, you may find that what we call forgotten never really left. Legend 1. The Burning Graves of Centralia. Beneath the soot-streaked skies of Centralia, a coal town that once bustled with life, the earth itself has been smoldering for over half a century. The story begins in 1962, when a controlled burn at a garbage dump near a coal seam sparked an underground inferno. The fire found the veins of anthracite that ran like black blood beneath the town, and it never stopped burning. But that's just the documented beginning. The legend goes deeper. They say that even before the fire, strange things happened in Centralia. Miners spoke of voices echoing in untouched tunnels, of lights flickering where no lamps hung, of tunnels collapsing where no fault should be. When the ground cracked open and steam began to rise, some didn't see it as an accident. They saw it as a reckoning. As the fire spread, so did the fear. Roads warped, buildings sank, and toxic gases seeped through basement walls. One boy fell into a sinkhole that opened in his backyard. He was saved, but barely. Others weren't so lucky. They say you can still hear coughing in the fog that drapes the empty streets, and whispers carried on the wind that speak names long forgotten. Skeptics blame carbon monoxide and ground instability. Scientists call it a tragedy of poor foresight and mining practices, but the remaining locals, those who refused to leave even when the state declared the town condemned, tell a different story. They speak of figures walking in the smoke, and of glowing eyes peering from the fissures at night. Some believe the town was built on cursed ground, that the mine fire unearthed something meant to stay buried. Others whisper that the fire is no longer just burning coal but feeding on something else. Today, Centralia is a ghost town. Its zip code revoked, its church still standing empty and waiting. The roads are cracked, the signs are gone, but the smoke still rises, curling like fingers from the underworld. And deep down the fire waits, hungry, eternal, and very much alive. Legend 2. The albino cannibals of Ghost Mountain. High in the wooded ridges above Fairchance, Pennsylvania, near a place locals whisper about as Ghost Mountain, an unsettling tale has survived generations. It's not on any official map, and yet anyone born in the region knows the name and the warning. They say it began sometime in the early 1900s. After a series of mining accidents forced a family into isolation. Shunned and scarred, they vanished into the forested hills, retreating into caves and abandoned cabins near an old slag heap. As the years passed, so did their humanity. Local children grew up with a singular, bone-chilling tale, a tribe of albino feral cannibals stalking the woods at dusk, their skin pale as ash, their eyes burning red from decades in the dark. These weren't mere outcasts. According to legend, they had become something else, twisted by hunger, inbreeding, and something unnatural that lingered in those hills. In 1952, a group of teens dared to hike the trails on a dare. Only one returned, screaming about white-skinned things that watched from the trees, mimicked their voices, and moved faster than any human should. In the 1970s, a park ranger reported finding a mutilated deer, its bones arranged in a pattern he refused to describe. It wasn't a bear, he said. It wasn't right. The government never investigated, but hunters went missing. Campers spoke of footsteps circling their tents, strange clicks and whistles in the dark, and always the same detail: shapes in the trees with skin that glowed in moonlight. Skeptics chalk it up to folklore, albino wildlife, or misidentified cryptids, but the elders in Fairchance are firm. They're real, one said. They've always been there. We just learned not to go looking. Today, few venture up Ghost Mountain, even in daylight. The paths are overgrown, the warnings weather-worn, but when fog clings to the trees and the air goes still, those who wander too close sometimes hear giggles, low, distorted, and not entirely human. And if you see something white between the trees, don't run. Legend 4. The Wandering Widow of Jim Thorpe. In the scenic coal town of Jim Thorpe, where Victorian facades mask deeper scars, an old story still clings to the mist that rises from the Lehigh Gorge. They say a widow veiled in black still walks the streets by lantern light, searching for justice that never came. The legend begins in 1877 during the infamous Molly Maguire's trials. 20 Irish coal miners accused of violence and rebellion against the coal barons were hanged, some say unjustly, in the Carbon County Jail. One man, Thomas Fisher, was dragged from his cell despite protesting his innocence. His wife Catherine stood outside the jailhouse each day, dressed in mourning black, her eyes hollow, her voice begging for the truth to be heard. On the night of his execution, thunder shook the valley. Locals swore they saw Catherine outside the jail, arms raised, cursing those inside. She vanished that night. Some say she drowned herself in the river. Others say she was taken, but she never really left. For over a century, people have reported seeing a woman in black wandering the jail grounds. She appears most often in early November, near the date of the executions. Tourists describe cold spots near cell 17, the same cell where Fisher carved a handprint into the wall with soot and blood, a mark that remains today despite every attempt to remove it. Others have seen her near the old courthouse steps, her veil fluttering despite no wind, her lantern flickering with blue flame. She's silent, but her presence drains warmth from the air and presses on your chest like sorrow made flesh. Skeptics call it hysteria, the product of ghost tours and old Irish grievances, but even they avoid walking alone near the jail after dusk. And the handprint, tested, scrubbed, painted over, always returns. Today, Jim Thorpe thrives on tourism, its streets filled with charm. But when night falls, some windows still shutter early, and locals say if you hear the soft creak of petticoats on stone or see the glow of a lantern near the prison wall, do not follow. The widow walks for justice, and she walks still. Legend 5. The Cursed Bell of Braddock Church. Braddock, Pennsylvania, once the furnace heart of America's steel empire, is now a place of rust and echoes. But amid the ruins stands an old stone church, with a bell tower that hasn't rung in nearly a century. And there's a reason why. The tale begins in 1905, at St. Elias Parish, when the town was thriving and the church bell rang out every Sunday, its voice deep and solemn, echoing across the Monongahela River. But one autumn morning, as the bell rang out for Mass, a bolt of lightning split the sky and struck the steeple, sending shards of slate and flame crashing to the ground. Inside the bell tower, Father Malik was found, his body unburned, yet eyes wide in terror, mouth open in a final silent scream. The cause of death was never clear. The church replaced the bell, but the parishioners noticed something strange. Every time it rang, something terrible followed. A child drowned. A foundry explosion killed 7 men. A cholera outbreak swept through the block nearest the church. Locals whispered that the bell had been cursed, that when the new bronze was cast, it was mixed with metal taken from a condemned prison in Europe, where hundreds had been executed. They said the bell carried that death within. In 1923, after a mass of inexplicable deaths, the bell was silenced and sealed. The tower was locked, but still people claim to hear it. At night, especially during storms, a low, mournful chime echoes across Braddock. Some say it's the wind. Others say it's the bell ringing from beyond, calling the dead. In 1967, a group of teens broke into the tower. Only one survived, raving about a figure in robes, eyes bleeding black, holding a chain like a noose. He never spoke clearly again. The church is empty now, a relic of brick and sorrow. Yet no one dares remove the bell. Even vandals avoid it. And on some nights, especially near the anniversary of the lightning strike, locals still hear the deep toll coming not from the tower, but from the earth below. And they know when that bell rings again, something will die. Legend 6. The Crying Crypts of Derry Church. Derry Church, now part of Hershey, Pennsylvania, carries a sweetness in its name, thanks to chocolate fame. But beneath the candy-coated history lies a far older, darker tale. On the grounds of a centuries-old Presbyterian church, surrounded by crooked tombstones and half-sunken graves, the dead are said to cry. The legend dates back to the late 1700s, when the church's original stone crypt was built to house the bodies of prominent settlers and clergy. It was a quiet place, until 1811, when parishioners arriving for Sunday service found the crypt door open, heavy stones shifted as if by force. Inside, the coffins were scattered, bones displaced. No animals, no signs of break-in, just claw marks. After the tomb was resealed, the crying began. At first it came at dusk, a low, muffled sobbing from beneath the earth. Then it shifted to midnight, full wails like a woman keening in grief. One farmer passing by with his horse said the beast reared and refused to go forward. It sounded like mourning, he whispered, but it weren't human. In 1842, a grave digger named Amos Slade vanished while tending to a burial. They found his shovel and boot near the crypt, and something else, scratched words on the crypt wall: "She is awake." Local lore claimed one of the entombed women, Anne Caraway, had been buried alive, a victim of catalepsy mistaken for death. When she awoke in the dark, she clawed until her fingers shattered. Her screams were ignored. Her grief, however, never stopped. Modern visitors say the crying still happens, especially in autumn. Paranormal investigators have recorded strange audio, high-pitched weeping, names being whispered, and once a voice pleading, "Let me out." Historians say it's old stone settling, acoustics, squirrels, yet no other crypt in the region draws such reports. And no matter the explanation, the church never removed Anne's nameplate. It's been worn smooth by fingers, those seeking to comfort, or perhaps silence, the grief below. Some nights the wind howls through the graveyard in a way that sounds just too human, and if you stand near the crypt with your head bowed, they say you'll hear her crying still centuries later, waiting for someone to listen. Legend 7. The Phantom of Pandemonium Furnace. Deep in the Laurel Highlands, not far from the ghost town of New Geneva, there once stood a blast furnace known to the locals as Pandemonium. A fitting name, for what it forged was more than iron. Built in the 1830s during Pennsylvania's iron boom, the Pandemonium Furnace was a towering inferno of stone and fire, surrounded by dense woods and whispers. Workers told stories of shadows dancing along the treetops and strange figures watching from the tree line. They said the flame burned blue at night, and that the screams of the furnace weren't always the roar of molten ore. One tale tells of a foreman named Jedediah Brandt, ruthless, superstitious, and feared. During a particularly harsh winter with production lagging, he reportedly made a pact, offerings to the furnace in exchange for endless flame. When a young worker fell into the pit during a night shift, Jedediah said nothing. Some say he pushed it. The accidents increased, men vanishing, screams from the chimney that echoed even without fire. One night, the furnace exploded, killing 7 and reducing the iron stack to rubble. Jedediah's body was never found, only his boots, scorched and upright at the edge of the pit. Locals avoided the site after that, but the stories continued. Campers reported a tall figure wrapped in black smoke, face flickering like flame, emerging from the ruins when the moon was full. Hikers heard the ring of hammer on anvil where no forge stood. One old-timer claimed to see glowing eyes through the fog, like coals staring through sin. Archaeologists called it industrial collapse. Historians blamed poor engineering, but the woods around Pandemonium remain unnaturally silent. Birds don't sing, the wind feels wrong, and the ruin, they're still warm to the touch, decades after the last fire died. Today, thrill seekers try to find what remains. Some never make it to the ruins. Others come back pale and hollow-eyed, saying they heard the blast furnace roar again, heard a voice from the pit, calling them by name, and somewhere deep in the woods, the spirit of Jedediah Brandt may still be stoking his infernal forge, burning whatever dares come near. Legend 8. The Lantern Witch of Shade Gap. Nestled within the Blacklog Valley of south-central Pennsylvania, the tiny town of Shade Gap is mostly forgotten now, a quiet whisper in a ravine of shadows. But ask the locals and they'll tell you to avoid the woods after dark, especially if you see a lantern swinging in the distance. They call her the Lantern Witch. Her story traces back to the 1860s, when a midwife named Hester Yule lived in a cottage deep in the forest. She was known for her strange ways, using herbs that grew only by moonlight, speaking in riddles, always seen walking with an oil lantern even in broad daylight. Some swore she could summon breezes on still days or make fevers vanish with a single breath. But when a fever swept through the valley and children began dying, suspicion turned to blame. A grieving father, mad with loss, led a mob into the woods. Hester's home was burned to ash. Her screams echoed through the trees, but her body was never found. That winter the lantern returned. At first it was just a soft glow moving between the trees. Then came the knockings, 3 times, always at the back door. Livestock went missing. People awoke with dirt under their nails and no memory of the night before. A preacher tried to cleanse the woods with prayer. He vanished. Hunters report seeing a pale figure walking just beyond their firelight, holding a lantern that sways without rhythm. They say she hums to herself, a melody no one can place. Sometimes she whispers names, yours if you're unlucky. Skeptics say it's swamp gas or headlights from distant roads, but those who followed the lantern never find the source, just the scent of burned herbs, and once a child's doll charred at the edges left in the snow. Modern ghost hunters come and go. One teen caught a whisper on tape, "They buried me wrong." Now Shade Gap rarely speaks her name aloud, but still that light appears, especially near Hester's supposed death date, swinging, steady, patient, and the warning remains. If you see a lantern in the forest, do not follow, not unless you wish to join her walk. Legend 9. The Demon Dog of Donegal. In the rolling farmland outside Donegal, Pennsylvania, where the hills rise like sleeping beasts and fog clings low to the soil, an old legend prowls the crossroads. Locals call it the Black Shuck. Others simply call it the Demon Dog. It begins in 1859, when a mail carrier named Elijah Brinks disappeared along the old Pike Road between Donegal and Stallstown. His horse returned, riderless, its flanks torn by claws. Search parties found only his bag and one boot, still smoldering. Beside it, paw prints the size of dinner plates, burned into the frozen ground. Since then the beast has been seen by many, described as jet black, its fur bristling with static, and eyes like molten fire. The dog appears on foggy nights along isolated roads. It never barks, it simply stares, and those it stares at don't last long. In 1913, a steelworker crashed his car swerving to avoid a black dog on Route 31. His final words: "It had no shadow." During the 1970s, truckers passing through the Laurel Highlands reported something running alongside their rigs at 60 miles an hour, keeping pace, grinning with jagged teeth. But it's not just sightings. The demon dog brings misfortune. Crops rot. Machinery fails. Dreams turn violent. Some say it's a harbinger, an omen of death. Others believe it is death, an old world spirit imported from Europe. bound to these lands by blood and curses. Skeptics say it's superstition or exaggerated bear sighting, but no one can explain the melted paw prints, the scorched grass, the radio static that screams through CBs as it passes. Today, truck stops near Donegal still keep a charm behind the counter, a silver coin tied in red string, for the dog, they'll say, just in case. And if you ever drive through those hills and see a pair of glowing eyes just beyond the headlights, don't stop, don't slow down, and whatever you do, don't look back, because the demon dog follows only those who notice. Legend 10. The Iron Ghost of Frick's Loch. Along the Schuylkill River, hidden beneath ivy and thyme, lies the ghost town of Frick's Loch, a cluster of crumbling stone houses and boarded windows silently decaying in the shadow of a nuclear plant. Once a bustling canal village in the 1800s, it was abandoned, sealed off and left to rot. But something stayed behind. The legend tells of a blacksmith named Elias Frick, descendant of the town's founder and the last to leave. When the Pennsylvania Railroad bypassed the village and the canal dried up, families moved on. Elias did not. He kept his forge burning, night after night, until one day the smoke stopped. His home was found locked, cold and empty. Only the forge glowed, embers still alive though no firewood lay within. After that, stories began to spread. A figure in soot-covered clothes was seen walking between the homes, dragging a heavy chain. Doors slammed without wind. Locals heard the rhythmic clang of hammer on anvil coming from the ruins, echoing through the woods like a heartbeat. Paranormal investigators have captured footage of glowing red sparks flying from the blacksmith shed, though the roof caved in decades ago. Others speak of a metallic smell in the air, like iron and blood, and sudden warmth, as if a forge had just been stoked nearby. In 1999, a teen exploring the village disappeared. His flashlight was found near the old lock house. It was melted. Skeptics call Frick's Loch a relic, a playground for vandals and ghost hunters. But the site remains fenced and heavily patrolled, not by police but by private security hired by the power plant next door. Too dangerous, they say. Locals still cross themselves when passing the trailhead, whispering that Elias forged something he shouldn't have. A binding, a warning, or perhaps a curse. And when night falls over the ghost town, the clang returns, steady, endless, echoing from a forge that should not burn. The Iron Ghost is still working, still waiting. Legend 11. The Screaming Woods of Renovo. In Clinton County, where the Susquehanna River snakes through untouched forest, there's a stretch of wild, called Kettle Creek. Remote, beautiful, and eerily silent. But north of the town of Renovo, deep in that ancient wilderness, the trees don't just whisper, they scream. The locals call it the Screaming Woods. The legend begins in 1921, when a logging crew vanished over the course of 3 nights. Only one man survived, found wandering barefoot down the mountain, clothes shredded, his eyes glassy with terror. The trees, he muttered, they watched, then they screamed. That might have ended it, just a woodsman's madness. But the reports didn't stop. Hunters spoke of banshee-like cries cutting through the still night, so sharp they rattled rifle stocks. Campers found their gear scattered, tents slashed by something that moved silently. One scout leader said the trees moved closer while his group slept. By the 1960s, the area had become a dead zone. Wildlife abandoned it. Birds fell silent. Even the wind seemed to avoid the ravine, where the screams were loudest. The sound itself is hard to describe. Some say it's like a child wailing. Others say it's the roar of a woman in grief. Audio recordings captured only static, and a pulse like a distant drumbeat. An old ranger, now retired, called it the forest crying through someone else's mouth. Folklore says a Lenape woman, wrongly accused of witchcraft, was burned alive at the site in the 70s. Her screams were so terrible they echoed into the trees and stayed. Others believe it's the earth itself, mourning the scars left by axes and saws, punishing those who dared to cut too deep. Skeptics blame owls, wind tunnels, or geological shifts, but no expert has stayed overnight. Today, that part of the forest remains untouched, not for preservation, but fear. No trail crosses it, no cabins stand nearby, and if you happen to camp too close, the locals say to bring earplugs, not to block out the sound but to keep the scream from getting inside you, because once you've heard it, you carry it forever. Legend 12. The Witch Window of Hex Hollow. Tucked into a lonely pocket of southern York County lies Rameyer's Hollow, more famously known as Hex Hollow, a name whispered with caution across Pennsylvania for over a century. It's a place of dark folk magic, unsolved murder, and a window that some say still looks back at you. The legend begins in 1928, with the death of a powwow doctor named Nelson Rameyer, a practitioner of Pennsylvania Dutch folk healing. To many, he was a quiet man who used herbs and charms, but to a few, he was something else, a witch, a wielder of old hexes. That year, a young man named John Blymeyer, plagued by illness and paranoia, sought guidance from another healer. The advice was chilling: destroy Rameyer's spellbook and burn a lock of his hair. Convinced Rameyer had cursed him, Blymeyer and two others broke into the man's home in Hex Hollow. They beat him to death. But here's where the legend grows cold and strange. They tried to burn the house to hide their crime, but it wouldn't catch. The wood smoked, the drapes curled, yet the fire refused to spread, as if the house, or something within it, would not allow desecration. After their arrest, stories bloomed. Locals said the hollow had always been cursed, that Nelson's window, the one he used to watch the moon while chanting, wasn't a regular window at all, that if you looked into it at night, you'd see your own death, sometimes just your reflection, sometimes something standing behind you. Years passed, but the stories didn't fade. Hikers report seeing a man standing in the ruined house, though it has long been gutted by time. One ghost hunter claimed his camera failed entirely near the old window frame. Every photo black, except one, showing a single eye staring out. Skeptics call it rural paranoia, old world superstition, but even the skeptical rarely linger. The house still stands barely under the strangling grip of vines. Locals leave offerings on the steps, and every so often a brave soul peers through the witch window. Some say it's just glass, others say it's a doorway, and the hollow still waits.